we can all inspire change. And I think so many of us are scared to try or scared to do. You don't have to be anyone special, quote unquote. You don't have to be a celebrity or someone that's got 100,000 followers to try and make a difference. I don't have a big following. I'm just an idiot that doesn't know how to quit and is too stubborn to say enough's enough. And here we are, hopefully made a difference, made an impact, created conversation, created some change, and raised a pretty substantial amount of money that will genuinely make a difference in helping feed children that need it. This idea of like, same, go all the way back to my granddad, if not you, then who? Like, why can't you be the one that creates change, that creates a positive impact? And at the end of the day, if we all stand by and do nothing on social and economic issues that mean something to us, then nothing ever will change. Often the hardest parts of the journey are the ones that people don't see, but without doing that, you don't get to the end goal.
John, how are we doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm well. I've been faffing around with a new microphone for a while, but we are up and running, and I thought I'll just nip it in the bud. There is a background noise of a fan for anyone listening, which I apologise for, but you don't need to be listening to me. You need to be listening to John and all the stories he has to tell from what has been an eventful, I was going to say a couple of weeks, but it was much longer than a couple of weeks. So for those that don't know, I'll have covered this in the intro already, but to be brief, John's just ran 48 marathons in the 48 counties of England in 48 days, all for a cause that's very personal to him, a cause that's been discussed very, very openly by mainstream media over the past 12 months or so, and I'm going to let him do the rest of the talking because it's been a journey that I've enjoyed following. It's been a journey that's never been done before, and it's a journey that comes from a place of personal meaning. So, John, I'm going to start from the top and ask about your childhood. Just explain to us how you grew up, the situation that you're in, and the key elements that make you who you are today.
Yeah, it's almost like an autobiography, isn't it? Going back to the beginning and why I decided to put myself through 8 weeks of hell. But
you're not ghostwriting it, which is unique these days.
This is true. So yeah, if we go back to the start, really. So I was kind of 11, 12 years old, I think it was. I remember coming home from school and a knock on the door, and it was a police officer saying that my father had fallen off a multi-storey roof, landed on his back and broken his back and was in intensive care. So he was an ex-military man, really active bloke. He was our major breadwinner. My mum worked part-time. And essentially he then spent the next 6 to 9 months in and out of hospital, in intensive care. When he got to hospital, they were expecting him not to make it through the night and managed to survive, but ended up being paralysed from pretty much the waist down. So our life changed, as you can imagine. My mum had to become his full-time carer, and we basically lost everything. Ended up living in council-funded accommodation, had to rely on the government for benefits and support, and it was through no fault of our own. It was just an accident at work, some scaffolding collapsed, and our lives changed. So I spent my teenage years living in what I guess now today is called childhood food poverty. I remember for us a treat on a Sunday was having a glass of orange juice instead of just water, and having Clover spread instead of Better Buy 19p spread. So it was a very interesting childhood when I was still attending a state-funded grammar school at the time. So as you can imagine, spending a lot of time around significantly wealthy families. And then there's me and my knockoff five-stripe poppers. Do you remember poppers when they were all the rage? I'm a little bit older than you, so you probably don't remember them. But yeah, so it was this awareness of how different and how much your life can change by things outside of your control. And then I suppose if we fast forward best part of 20 years, I've managed to get out of that poverty situation, built my own, I suppose, successful businesses. And then during COVID, the whole situation kind of came to the fore again. So speaking to our local food banks around how oversubscribed they'd become when they were reaching out for local support and financial support and food donations. And obviously Marcus Rashford was largely in the news with the free school meals element. I'll stay away from that because I think that's more of a political discussion rather than the food poverty side that we look at. But essentially we decided in November to set up an initiative called Miles for Meals, which was, as a gym, we were going to run as many miles as we could and try and generate £3,000 to help fund meals for children at Christmas at our local food bank, and ended up generating £10,000. And this kind of lit a fire with me in terms of, well, if we can do that in 1 month, what if we got the whole country behind it, or tried to get people around the country involved and engaged in it? So we set it up as a charity, so fully registered with the Charity Commission, and got trustees, got governance, mission statements, all the unbelievable hoops you've got to jump through to set up a charitable organisation. All the boxes got ticked. And then, we got set up with a charity, and from there, the two aims are raise awareness of food poverty, and that it's not just a stereotypical belief that it's people living on benefits that don't want to work, that are just using the government to pay for their children, but it's predominantly people that have fallen on hard times and just need a little bit of help to get back on their feet. So number one is raise awareness, and number two is raise funding. And that all kind of came together in a merging with my other stupid ideas of charity challenges and stuff that I can do to test myself, with the 48, 48, 48. So the idea was to take the Miles for Meals initiative on a roadshow. And in full transparency, drunk with the rugby lads, came up with the idea of running a marathon a day in each of the counties. Found out it had never been done. And here we are, nearly a year on, and 1 and a bit weeks from completing 48 successive marathons.
There we are. I mean, thank you for the whistle stop tour, I guess we can call it. But I can imagine there's so many elements along the way that have, well, for the sake of time, have been missed out, that would have been very formative for the person you are today, because you run multiple successful businesses and you've come from a very challenging background in that sense. And as you've said, it's something that was no fault of your own. It was pure accident that's put you in that situation. But you were in the controlling the controllables and ignoring the uncontrollables long before it was popularly spoken about on social media, and I think that will have given you the formative understanding to be able to take on things like this, which it's been amazing to see unfold.
Absolutely. I mean, I always say that the person that taught me about mental resilience is my mum. Like, watching her have to go through what she did to support my father, look after a family, try and keep all the wheels turning, and try and keep food on the table. Looking back, you don't appreciate it. Like, at the time, you don't appreciate it, but looking back, you realise all those little bits of work ethic, controlling what you can control, getting up early, going to bed late, making sure that the work is done so that the next day is a little bit easier for everybody involved. They were the formative years in my work ethic and, I suppose, my mental resilience, I guess. And a lot of people have said to me over the years, oh, you're trying to build successful businesses or create wealth, for want of a better word, to pass on to your children. And no, my idea of passing something on to my children is doing what my mum did to me and teaching them about work ethic and essentially being mentally resilient and having that ability to work for what you want in life, because I feel that that will serve my children better than just giving them cash, but giving them the opportunity to know that they can achieve anything that they want in life as long as they work for it and actually want to do the hard yards to get to that point and end goal. So yeah, I think a huge amount of learning went through that kind of 7 or 8 year period before I went to university, and then since then, obviously with the rugby, the strongman, brief foray into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and mixed martial arts, and now being whatever I am now. Can't even probably label it, I suppose, a hybrid athlete, for want of a better description. There's been a huge amount of learning experiences along the way.
I can imagine. I think partly from curiosity personally, but also just to set the scene a little bit more, it'd be great to dive into that transition from rugby to strongman, because it's, if we plotted this out on a graph, where you are now to where you were and where you're going, more interestingly, it would be a pretty chaotic graph. So rugby to strongman, talk me through how we got there.
Yeah, so essentially I was playing National League level rugby, paid to play. I suppose kids nowadays will call it semi-professional, but I find that a bit pretentious to call it that. So yeah, I was playing at a decent standard at university, and I actually remember the week before my accident, for want of a better word, stood on the halfway line thinking, do I still want to play this game? I just wasn't enjoying it, and I'd kind of fallen out of love of something that I'd done since I was 11. And anyway, the following week, a scrum collapsed over at Whitchurch Rugby Club. My forehead touched my sternum, felt 2 clicks in my neck, and came off the field fearing the worst. Went to the hospital. They said there was nothing wrong and didn't even x-ray it. But then saw an osteopath on the Monday, and she confirmed that she thought there was something broken or wrong with the vertebrae. Anyway, went back to the hospital, pushed to get an x-ray, and turned out I had 2 hairline fractures in my neck. So that significant injury mixed with me questioning whether I actually still wanted to play rugby led me to think, well, what next? So I decided to take a year out of the sport. I've been told ideally that I should take a year out from the front row anyway, or consider a positional change. As much as I like to think I've got skills to play outside of the front row, I absolutely don't.
Easier said than done, going from loose head to 12, isn't it?
Yeah, give me a pass in open space and I'm looking for the nearest fast person to give the ball to, not to run at. But so I decided to just spend a year away from rugby, rehabbing, just seeing how strong I could get, how in shape I could become without having the constant rigours of playing rugby. And about 4 or 5 months into that journey, I was just training in the gym, complete happenstance, training in a squat rack next to another guy who was a pretty big lifter. We started chatting. He asked me whether I'd ever considered competing in strongman. And these were the days where, to use Facebook, you still had to log into a desktop. It wasn't the days now where everything's just instantly accessible. And the only way you could actually find out about strongman was through an old forum. I don't know whether you remember it, called Sugden Barbell. So most people, you remember when you used to keep your training log online and all that kind of stuff. And so it was one of those things. I've always seen it on TV and I've always thought, lift a car, I wonder if I could do that. And we all have that, I reckon that can't be that hard, and all the usual stuff that comes with it. And so I said, I'd love to have a go, but obviously don't even know where to start. So he introduced me into this kind of little underground world of strongman. So this is before there was Facebook, social media, any real knowledge of what it was. Most competitions were still in car parks at the time. And he introduced me to Lawrence Charlet, kind of met all of that circle, Adam Bishop, and guys that are now, and back then were at the top of their game, for most of them still are. Got training with those guys and just thought, let's see how strong we can get. And I remember actually having a conversation with Loz saying, I'm 108 kilos. Do I go as big as I can and see whether I'm an open weight competitor, or do I stay and try and do under 105? And I believe his words were, "There's no weight categories in the jungle." So
that's a phrase I've heard all too frequently in my powerlifting days.
And so
there's also no Texas deadlift bars in the jungle, Steve.
Yeah, exactly that. But obviously, it was a swayed conversation because he's coming from a position of open weight competition himself. But for me, at that time, my mindset was, I want to be the strongest man, not the strongest man body weight, which my opinion on that position, that has now changed. But at the time, that's what it was. So I was like, right, let's go all in. So started increasing body weight, ended up 12 months later winning Britain's natural strongest man. So that's the drug-tested version of strongman. The following year, then won Midland's strongest man, which was non-tested, while still competing in the drug-tested federations, as I remained drug-free throughout. Went to England's strongest man, ended up winning the drug-free British title twice, the Midlands title twice, competing at England's strongest man 3 times. And then about 4 or 5 years into the journey, I'd kind of ballooned without realising really to 185 kilos in body weight, or just shy of 185. So put on over 70 kilos in what I convinced myself was obviously good solid mass, but looking back it was probably a good 75% body fat. But you live in that bubble, don't you? You convince yourself mass moves mass, and the heaviest guys are the strongest guys, and you convince yourself, you believe your own bullshit. And then I got to that point of being that heavy, and I started living with chronic knee pain in my right knee. I'd already had issues with the right knee from rugby for years, had a couple of clear outs on it, cartilage issues, MCL issues, and the pain was just getting worse and worse. And then I went up to Scotland to compete in a Giants Live qualifier, trying to qualify for a Giants Live show, which is like the full professional kind of gig. Was doing really well, I was in the top 3 going into the midway point, and something just went pop in my knee. Couldn't stand on it. Stupidly tried to do the farmers and dropped the farmers on my foot, and in the end the organisers pulled me out. They were like, "You're not continuing, this is ridiculous." So they pulled the plug before I did myself some damage. Went back to England, got on a plane, flew back, saw a few specialists, and they all said the same, that essentially my patellar tendon had become thickened in my right knee, and the only way to reduce or remove the pain was to have surgery to scrape down the patellar tendon, which would have given me a significant chance of rupture under load. So it would have taken away the pain, but added a significant risk to my health. So it was one of those, what do I do? I had a young daughter at the time. She was only 1 or 2 years old. I had a business that needed me, and it was becoming a selfish pursuit. And at the time, I was squatting nearly 380 kilos. And if you've got that on your back and your patellar tendon ruptures, you're talking a similar fate to my dad in terms of paralysis or potentially death. Who knows? If 380 kilos comes crashing down on you, you're in trouble. So yeah, I just decided that actually this is a selfish pursuit. I'm not prepared to take the risk and risk my life for something that A, doesn't pay the bills, B, is still a hobby even if you're competing at the highest level, unless you've got a huge celebrity status, and C, if you're training, for me to play strongman is a bit like rugby. If you're competing in strongman or playing rugby with fear that something's going to hurt or go wrong or go snap, you're not going to be an effective top level performer. And for me, if I wasn't going to be at the top, then what's the point in doing it? What's the point in sacrificing years of my life for being mediocre? I did a lot of things I wanted to do. I was the first drug-free or drug-tested strongman, as far as I'm aware, to deadlift 400 kilos. Won British titles, held regional titles, hung with the big boys, and competed at a good level. So for me, I was happy to. Hey, do you know what? I had a good run. Time to pack it in. So I left strongman. I would say formally announced my retirement as if I was a big deal, but no, just put it out there saying that I'm done. Unfortunately, the knee isn't strong enough to withstand that level of weight and that level of competition. And then that led a 3-year journey into the weight loss. When you don't have to be 185 kilos anymore, and you are 185 kilos, you realise it's not particularly healthy. Going upstairs is troublesome, and tying your own shoelaces is a problem. So it was just a steady, slow weight loss. There was never a goal of becoming a runner, becoming an endurance athlete, becoming some sort of seeker of challenges in the endurance world. It was just stop being so fat and try and get your health back. And then, yeah, here we are, three and a bit years on, back down to around about 102 kilos this morning, and competing on endurance challenges. I've got a half Ironman in 2 weeks and a lot of stuff coming up next year on top of what we've already achieved this year with the 48.
How did your identity cope with leaving strongman?
Difficult. I think a lot of athletes define themselves by their sport. And that's why earlier on, like even then I fell into that trap there, saying I don't even know what I define myself of now because I'm not tied to a specific sport. I'm a jack of all trades, master of none, which I guess the industry likes to call a hybrid in terms of being all right at most things. But it was a real challenge because for 4 or 5 years I was John the Strongman. I was known locally for my gym, for my strength accolades. So many people looked at the numbers I could lift and had respect for those numbers, and to lose that identity, it was just, rugby was a little bit easier because I'd already knowingly decided that I probably wanted to walk away from it at the end of that season anyway. But strongman, when it essentially gets taken from you, yes, there was an element of choice in me deciding not to continue, but when your whole identity and who you are and what you post about and what you talk about and what you define yourself as disappears, it's a challenge. And I remember for a good year after, there was almost a grieving process of who am I, what am I doing, what do I want to do, what am I going to define as next. And I think that's why my businesses grew so significantly in that time thereafter, because I tried to define myself as a successful business person, because I was in a transition of being too heavy to compete in anything of any decent value to then put a different hat on and say, oh, that's what I do. So for me, it was, well, let's see how successful we can be in business whilst I get my health and my fitness squared away to become something again.
Where does the desire to be the best in your field come from? Because it was clearly a consideration with strongman when you made the decision to be in the open weights and push that, and then by the sounds of things, you channeled your drive into the businesses, and from what you just said there, I'm assuming the ambition with the business was the sky's the limit, and it's been very successful since then. But where does that drive to to push further and further come from?
I think it was from my granddad. So there's another part to the story with my dad that I've not really spoken about before, but essentially he ended up getting really depressed, as you can imagine, like being paralysed, your life changing, and having to rely on full time care. And he actually walked out on the family when I was about 15. And I never saw him again or spoke to him again until the day he died about 3 years ago. So in that time where he essentially went off the rails, disappeared, and cut all contact, my granddad kind of became my father figure, for want of a better word. And he was a formerly successful businessman, competed in a load of sports, ex-military man himself, and he always used to say to me, "If not you, then who?" And it was this whole idea of, he always used to say to me, like, you can literally be anything you want as long as you're prepared to do the work. And that was his mantra and what he lived by. And he always used to say to me as he started to get into his later years that he'd rather be a man that looked back and tried but maybe failed than a man that looked back and wished that he'd had a go when he could have, when he was younger, or when he had two working knees, or when he wasn't 60 years old and retiring. And that's always stuck with me. And he passed away 4 years ago. And I think in a way, without psychoanalyzing myself, I've probably been trying to prove him right, and that I can be as good as I want to be. And I think that's created a position in my head where it's just, if I'm going to do it, let's do it. Like when I decided to try jiu-jitsu, it was never let's all just have a dip a toe in the water and see how it went. It was training 7 days a week, trying to compete at the British Nationals, and ended up winning the British white belt title. And it was just one of those things where it's like, if I'm going to do it, let's do it. Because for me, that's my version of fitness. And I talk about this a lot. What's your version of greatness? What's your version of fitness? For some people, their version of greatness is just eating 3 square meals a day and getting 10,000 steps in. And that is no less important than my version of greatness, which is trying to see what my absolute limits are as an athlete and as a person. So yeah, for me, my version of fitness, my version of greatness is essentially, it's cliche, but be all you can be. If you're going to do it to the best of your ability, because otherwise you will look back in later life thinking, oh, what if I'd have trained that little bit more, pushed that a little bit harder. But that's just me. That's not saying that's the right way. That's just the way that I look at it.
I completely buy in there, and I think the beauty of it is it's completely relative, and I'm not afraid to say that it's something that I think we should all strive to maintain as a value, because it means different things to different people at different levels. But aiming to be the best version of yourself, as long as your intentions are in the right place, I don't think can be spun as a negative. But I think what you said there as well, in the sense that you want to prove him right. I think it's just a case of he slotted into that parenting figure for you, and all he's done is instill values instill in us as parents. I mean, you'll be instilling values into your daughter as a father, and it's something that's been carried forward. So, testament to him, it's something that's been truly embedded, and there aren't many better statements, accolades to carry than the ones that you've put out over the past couple of years to really just hammer home those values.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think one of the last things he said to me was that you die twice. And I think this is actually a quote from somebody else. I don't think he came up with it. I think he read it somewhere. It might have been Winston Churchill, but you die twice. The day you die and the day your name is spoken for the last time on this earth. And his concept was, make sure your memory lives on through your children, through your family, through the values that you taught them. It's not about trying to put your name in the history books or the Guinness World Records. It's about being the role model to your children and giving them the life skills and the lessons that you were fortunate to learn from your elders and ancestors and so on and so forth. And I think that's where I sit now with everything that I do, is that my kids can be proud of me, and that they'll learn those lessons to pass them on to their kids one day as well. But I mean, going back to your earlier point, I put on my Insta stories yesterday because somebody criticised me because I took a photo of my fairly extensive whiskey collection, saying that I was
going to bring this up. Yeah.
Saying that I'm a bad example of fitness, and I just replied back saying, "Don't judge me by your standards. Like, if you don't drink, fine. I have no issue with you not drinking. If you're a vegan, cool. That doesn't bother me. I eat meat, but that doesn't mean we have to agree on everything in life." And I think so many people tie themselves to their version of acceptable, their version of fitness, their version of diet, their version of drinking or smoking, whatever it is. And I think I put on my Insta story saying, "What's your version of fitness?" And I'd say 90% of the people that came back, the answer was to be able to do what I want, when I want, and how I want. A variation of that. And it's so brilliant to see now that although the fitness industry still lives in these extremes of Tupperware, chicken, rice, and abs, or literally nothing fitness related, that we've now almost starting to slowly find some semblance of normality in a middle ground, that actually you can be fit, you can enjoy your life, and you can be able to train to be able to do most things that you want in your day-to-day life, in your sporting or competitive desires, and with those around you, with your kids, with your partner, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's a funny old world how people judge you by their standards, and feel the need to tell you as well.
Speaking of, I think it's probably time that we dived into the depth of the conversation here and really explored the lessons learned from the 48. And you were speaking before you set off around the challenges of getting something like this off the ground. And I mean, we've sort of dabbled in these things in the past together. But I think it's probably fair to say, started my campaigns with more months and planning and things ahead of you. So I've jumped through more hoops in the past for the bigger projects. But that's not to say that you haven't learned lessons along the way yourself, of course, but it's just a case of the bigger projects trying to galvanise that effect. I think we had some discussions on how best to position certain things, and a few of the things that came up to me from you to me actually shocked me because it were things that I'd never encountered before, and it was the initial pushback on you wanting to do something positive for the community, for the charity, and yet you were being pushed back as a result of the standards of other people.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I, for some reason, seem to create an opinion with most people, whether it's because I'm happy to say what I think, or I'm less likely to sit. If someone takes a shot at me, I'm not the kind of person to sit there and just let it wash over me, and that's something I am actually working on, is being less combative. But unfortunately, I do seem to create a divisive opinion with some. I suppose, yeah, divisive opinion is probably the best way of putting it. And one of the things I found from day one when I started to move and transition into this endurance sphere is a judgment by some, not all, but some that already operate and live in that endurance world of who am I to come into their world and try and do their thing. Now, it goes back to that question earlier about losing your identity around strongman. So many people identify themselves through their sport. So many runners, triathletes, Ironman competitors, so on and so forth, define themselves as their ability to move over long distances quickly, and often at the expense of other parts of their fitness. So, but if that's their definition of fitness, that's fine. But I've found some of them will try and justify their lack of gym strength or lack of other areas of their fitness because they are an Ironman or they are a triathlete. And I think it upset a few that I was coming into that world with a 300 kilo deadlift saying that I'm going to do an Ironman in the same year. Because it was like, well, does that then no longer justify their ability to not be gym strong? Now, for me, it's ridiculous. Like, if you judge your own fitness by your own world, and if I'm pulling a 300 kilo deadlift and trying to run an Ironman, I'm not going to be in the competitive part of a running field. And I accept that because that's my version of my definition of fitness. But unfortunately, others didn't like it. So I remember my first pool session, there was an Ironman competitor in the lane next to me. And he obviously saw me looking a little bit nervous, getting back into the water for the first time since high school. And his whole thing, he actually said to me, like, "Oh, what you doing? What you training?" I was like, "Oh, I'm actually about to start my swim training. I'm going to try and run and complete an Ironman this year." And he literally looked me up and down, laughed, and went, "Yeah, good luck," and got in the water and swam off. And I was just phenomenal arrogance and attitude that unfortunately has been a thread that's run through all of my participation in the endurance world. So when we're trying to organise the 48, we asked for ambassadors to get involved in local community groups, running clubs, schools, so on and so forth, to try and essentially help us with boots on the ground. The whole point was raise awareness. So me just running on my own around the country is not really going to raise awareness. We needed as many people to run with me, to be involved, to be part of the organisation of it. And I had a couple of running groups email me back saying that they refused to be involved because I'm devaluing the marathon distance. Now, for me, isn't the whole point of a running club is to raise awareness that anyone can be a runner and to get as many people running as possible. So if an ex 180 plus kilo strongman can run 48 marathons, surely that takes away 99.9% people's of excuses as to why they're not a runner. But unfortunately, they looked at it as it was challenging the status quo and challenging their definition of what a runner is. But again, it comes back to people wanting to put themselves into boxes of them wanting to be identified by the sport that they do. And for so many of us, the sport that we do in our own little world makes us a little bit elite in that little sphere. But I think it's just accepting that. It comes down to definitions, and it's just accepting that people are judging you by their standard rather than what you're doing is wrong. I even had it recently. This weekend, someone locally put up a Facebook status saying that I've conned everyone out of £40,000 and I'm keeping the money for myself. Granted, just giving is putting the money directly in the Miles for Meals charity account, and we are fully regulated by the Charities Commission, HMRC, and all the legal procedures that come with it. But again, people will judge you by what they would probably do if they could access 40 grand. But it is what it is, and back when I started, this used to really piss me off and used to get to me, and I'd lose sleep over it, but now I just let it wash over me. And I spoke to Taran, my coach, and the Iron Cowboy very briefly before the challenge started, and they both kind of said that the people that are criticising, that are putting it down, that are trying to tell you what you're doing is wrong, don't waste time and energy on them, because like you said earlier, control the controllables. And unfortunately, the people that are taking shots are people that are never going to get involved, they're never going to help you raise awareness, and they're certainly never going to donate. So it's like arguing with someone that is a keto fantasist on why you don't agree with keto. It's like a religion, you're not going to change their mind. So you do what you do, control what you can control, and work with the people that actually have an open mind to want to work with you, rather than just trying to convince people that have already decided that you're the enemy and they don't want to be involved because you're the antichrist of their definition of fitness.
Yep, I've had some of this, not to the same scale where I'm being accused of pocketing 40 grand. Well, mind you, I've had some of that in the past, but people don't have a very clear understanding of how charity donations actually work, which is quite alarming. But say it with such conviction, which is always fascinating. But I've had similar, not many, but I've had people basically compare their standard of endurance at 72 kilos, having been competing in triathlons for 10 years, and then deciding that because that's what they do, then somehow everything that anybody that's slower than them does is completely irrelevant, and other things to that effect. But as you've said, it all comes down to the fact that there's some sort of projection going on, and engaging with those people doesn't get you to the end goal in any way. All it does is detract you from the end goal. And as you said, you were, if you'd engaged, you would have spent time, mental energy, and finger strength, which is probably lacking towards the end of the 48, replying to them and not gaining anything other than stress, because as you said, no donation, no support, no awareness coming, and that's not what the project was all about. The project was all about awareness and raising funds. And it wound me up when I heard about the running club specifically, because as you said, my best guess on what the values that underpin a running club should be reducing and lowering the barrier to entry for runners, quote unquote, whatever that definition means to different people, to be able to be a part of it. But it was very sad to hear that they didn't see it that way. But nonetheless, the project was a roaring success in my mind, and it's still going. And I think what I'd really like to hear is a bit of a whistle-stop summary of day 1 to day 48, and then we'll unpack some of the lessons along the way, because I can imagine at points it got pretty profound. I know very well firsthand that no one feeling lasts forever. There's ups and downs that come along with this sort of thing, and that is what makes it valuable. And looking back on it now, I'm sure you actually kind of miss it in a twisted, sadistic sort of way.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, you remove all of your... We all wear many hats, and we're all many things to many people, from partners, parents, business people, colleagues, friends. When you're doing a challenge like that, you are one thing. You are focusing on completing 26.2 miles a day. And the time that you're not running is spent recovering, resting, and preparing as best as you can to go again the next day. So yeah, in a sadistic way, there is an element of missing the simplicity of life that was. But I certainly do not miss the daily struggle to that level. Like I've said countless times on other podcasts and on my own Instagram that I think mental resilience is something that is like physical fitness. It needs to be taught, trained, and tested. It's not just something you acquire. So I obviously find
The key thing as well, just sorry to cut you off, but just it's a key point in my mind is that it can go dormant. It's not something that you acquire and retain. It's something that can go dormant.
exactly that, and that's why people keep saying to me, "Oh, why are you so busy again next year? You've got a load more challenges coming up." And I'm like, doing one challenge once, like cool, but in 6 months' time, the memory of the pain and the struggle and the lessons it taught me will have faded, and my mental resilience will have massively dropped. And for me, the 48 was a massive reference point because there's probably nothing I'm going to face physically, emotionally, mentally, business in life that will be as hard as those 48 days. So if I can get through those 48 days and I can get through whatever life throws at me over the next few months until my next foray into the Sahara Desert, but we'll probably get to that in a little bit. But yeah, in terms of whistle stop tour, like day one, the night before was nerves, excitement. Have I bitten off more than I can chew? What the fuck am I doing? I've told everyone that will listen and those that won't, I'm going to run 48 marathons. And the biggest fear for me was being the guy that just made a really shit effort of it. Like, you don't want to be that guy that's told everyone you're going to do 48 and then, oh, how did you get on? Oh, yeah, I managed 3. And that was a genuine fear. So I actually picked up a stress fracture. I just stepped awkwardly off a curb and felt something kind of move in my foot. And I had a stress fracture about 8 weeks out, but it finally got diagnosed 2 weeks after that. So I didn't run for 6 weeks before the first run. So that first one was a real nervous time because is my foot going to be up to getting through one marathon, let alone 48? And my physio, my podiatrist all said, like, your best bet is to postpone this 12 weeks. But for me, knowing that Will was going to be attempting the 48 marathons in 30 days, there wasn't another window. It was now or never. If I was going to be the first person to run consecutive marathons around the country, then I had to go when I went. So yeah, that first day was nervous, but actually easier than I thought. And it goes back to this idea again with many that the thought of doing something is sometimes worse than the doing of it. Once I got that first one out of the way, it was kind of, right, brilliant. We set a baseline. I know where I'm at. I learned a huge amount on that first day. And then it was trying to then create some momentum. Day 2, day 3, day 4 was just horrendous DOMs. Speaking to the guy who was the first person to recreate the Forrest Gump run across America, he'd said to me that it will take you 10 to 14 days before your body is run into submission. And he was spot on. The first 10 days were horrendous. Ankles, knees, quads, hamstrings, Achilles felt like they were going to rupture at any available opportunity. But knowing that just keep moving forwards. I started the thing with 3. So I basically use 3 tools in terms of how I get through these challenges. So the first one is don't die in the chair. That I believe is a guy called Chad Wright who first said this, promoted this idea. So a lot of people will quit on an ultra marathon sat in the chair. So they sit down at a rest point and convince themselves they can't get back up, can't move forward, can't run another step, and they'll quit. So for me, this idea of if you're going to quit whilst you're moving. Don't quit thinking that the fear of moving is the thing that makes you stop. So whenever those days came where I didn't want to get out of bed, didn't want to get out of the van, didn't want to get back up after a 15 or 10k loop to then go again, it was like, don't make the decision sat down. No matter how much pain you're in, get up, take the first steps and make the decision once you're moving. And then from there, the next step was, if you can start, you can finish. So for me, if I can move, then I can move for 26 miles or 26.2 miles. So once I'd got out of the chair, once I'd started moving, it was just keeping moving. And then once you got to the end of the 26.2, a good friend of mine who was a professional rugby player said that in his head, whenever he finished a game of rugby, then he had no excuse not to be able to start the next game of rugby the following week. So for me, if I can finish the marathon on that day, then I can start the next. And then it was just playing those 3 cliches and those 3 things over and over again. So don't quit while sat down. If you can start, you can finish. And if you can finish, you can start the next day. And that essentially got me to day 25, where the body finally started to feel normal. I was running quick times. I say quick times for the challenge that I was doing. But then, yeah, day 25 arrived and I collapsed. I finished the marathon 2 hours later, sat down, had my dinner, stood up to talk to the person's husband who I was staying with. And apparently my eyes just rolled into the back of my head and I smashed into the ground, split my eyebrow open, woke up on the floor of essentially this stranger's kitchen with blood pissing down my face, not knowing where I was, and essentially from just pure exhaustion collapsed. And then that ensued then another 7 days of struggle as I was essentially running with mild concussion symptoms. Luckily, my memory and speech was still kind of all fine, but it just felt very groggy and lightheaded if I went too hard and too fast. So I highly recommend nobody runs with a concussion. Medically, I probably should have stopped, and it's something I'm not proud of, and something I'll probably look back in later life and think I probably shouldn't have done that. But at the time, you're so solely focused on that goal that you just do what you can to get through it. Another 7 days of difficulty getting through that concussion. And then, to be honest, once I got to day 34, so me and my coach had said from day one that if I can get to day 34, the challenge is going to get completed. For some reason, we just said that was so far in that with only 14 to go, there is no way you're going to not get it done, no matter what the injury, what the issue, or what the problem is. So when I hit day 34, to me, I felt like I'd finished. And that was the real, relief and euphoric moment of, oh, we've made it. And then the next 2 weeks were kind of autopilot and just don't fuck up, don't get injured, don't do something stupid, don't neglect. Because at that point the body had pretty much adapted and there was quite a lot of pain in my ankles, but I'd started to just become numb to the pain. I knew it was painful, but I just found ways of blocking it out. So the last 2 weeks were very much just get through it without cocking it up this far in. I was super conscious of COVID in those last 2 weeks. Just if anything was going to stop me, it was going to be contracting COVID. So I became full-on social distance Norse, keeping my distance from everybody, making sure that there was nothing there that was going to give me a slight opportunity to get ill. But yeah,
well, you would have been so immunosuppressed and compromised that it actually would have been quite a severe risk to your health at that point, I'd imagine.
Yeah, that was one of the main conversations we had from the beginning, was what can derail this aside from my mental and physical ability, and it was COVID. I lost a good friend last year to COVID who was a strongman competitor, and he had side effects, complications, and essentially didn't wake up. And that was in my head for the 48 days. It was like, if I do get ill, I'm not in a good space. I'm putting myself through the ringer. I'm not what you'd call healthy right now. So, yeah, COVID was a very real and significant thing that I was worried about throughout. But we managed to get through 48 days without contracting anything, and as this far, still in tip-top health and condition. So managed to get through it. But, yeah, those last 2 weeks. But then I almost became a bit annoyed with it because so many people were like, oh, you've only got 10 left. And it's like, can we just not forget how far a marathon is? That's still 10 marathons. That's still 262 miles over the next 10 days that I've got to run. So it then became a little bit frustrating that people, although in my head I'd considered that the challenge was done now, it was just coasting to the end. A lot of people had almost switched off to it as well. But I knew by the time that we got to the final couple of days, fundraising would kick back in. People would appreciate the challenge that had been done. And then in those last 2 days, we had a massive chunk of donations made. And now we're just touching £41,000 raised for the 7 weeks effort.
Which is incredible, truly incredible. There's something very, very powerful about bringing people together, and I think that's what the final few days really told the story of. I think there were points throughout where you had more people on some days than the other, and it did obviously show the interaction and the roadshow effect that you were aiming to create. But the final few days did seem really quite powerful, community focused, and at the end of the day, what you were doing was a community focused project, wasn't it? You were aiming to support the community deprivation that you suffered from whilst you were growing up. So how much reflection, I mean, I know the answer, a lot, but what reflections did you have along the way around what got you to that point? What were the most profound and prominent reflections that you had along the way from a personal level?
I think it was just this overwhelming sense of, there were so many times I was running, and I remember in Northampton there was 110 people I think we started the day with, and some of those people were still like, oh, I've only ever run a 5k, but I'm going to try and run 10. So like, I haven't run in years, but I'm going to try and run 5K. And some of these people actually ended up running a half marathon on the day. And I remember running, and ITV were there to film bits of it. And I remember turning around and looking over my shoulder and just seeing this massive line of people. And it's in that moment I was just like, oh, like, it's working. We're having an impact, and it's taken nearly 40 days to do it, but it's finally working. And for day one, just me and my other half, to then day 40 to 48, where we had like upwards from 50 to 100 people on some days. It was just this idea that just really reaffirmed this idea that those first few weeks of anything, in anything from business to training to challenges, like they're the hard yards that no one really sees, but they're the hard yards you've got to go through to get to the bit, the golden arch at the end of it, and the rainbow and all that kind of stuff. And without all those days of running in the pissing down rain in Manchester and running up and down a canal on my own when I couldn't walk, and using my walking poles like crutches, like if I hadn't have gone through all of that, we wouldn't have gone through that massive awareness piece at the end. And throughout the course of the 7 weeks, we had over 1,000 people run with us. Over 50 people run their first marathons. We've had countless people get in touch saying that they want to now help us and raise funds and run their own Miles for Meals events. So I guess on reflection, it was just this idea of we can all inspire change. And I think so many of us are scared to try or scared to do. Like I remember when I first started posting on Instagram, trying to build a following, build an audience, and try and promote my businesses. Like my mates used to take the piss and being like, "Who are you to try and give advice on mental resilience? And who are you to try and inspire people? You're just one of us." And it was just this real reaffirmation that you don't have to be anyone special, quote unquote. You don't have to be a celebrity or someone that's got 100,000 followers to try and make a difference. I don't have a big following. I'm just an idiot that doesn't know how to quit and is too stubborn to say enough's enough. And here we are, hopefully in hindsight, we've made a difference, made an impact, created conversation, created some change, and raised a pretty substantial amount of money that will genuinely make a difference in helping feed children that need it. So I guess in hindsight, it was just this idea of like, same, go all the way back to my granddad. If not you, then who? Like, why can't you be the one that creates change, that creates a positive impact? And at the end of the day, if we all stand by and do nothing on social and economic issues that mean something to us, then nothing ever will change. So yeah, I suppose that was the biggest reflection. That hard work, often the hardest parts of the journey are the ones that people don't see. But without doing that, you don't get to the end goal. All of us can have it within us to create change, to create a community, to create a positive impact on the world. But also you can't do it together. Like I've said numerous times that my other half, Hannah, she was the glue that held the challenge together. Without her, the challenge wouldn't have been done. Without all the people that supported it, the ambassadors, the runners, and it was just this reminder that no matter how much you can do on your own, you need other people around you. And that was a valuable reminder for me to come back to with my businesses and my friendship circles. And no matter what we do on our own, the people around us matter. And make sure that they appreciate how much they mean to you and how much they've motivated you to do what you've done in life.
What are the major takeaways for you as a father from the experience?
Well, good question. It's an interesting one. So Hannah's, so we have a blended family basically. So my other half's got 2 children from another relationship. I've got 1 from another relationship, and we've got our own son on the way. It feels weird saying that out loud.
Yeah.
Thank you. So Lucas, Hannah's son, he said to me, he biked his first marathon with me. Bless him, he's only 10, out on his mountain bike, and he was bollocks by the end of it. I was dragging him around the last few miles. I was like, "Come on, kid, you ain't quitting, you ain't stopping. We're finishing this together." And he finished it, and he turned around to me at the end of it, and he said to me, "What's the youngest anyone's ever run a marathon?" And I was like, "I'm not sure, mate, why?" And he was like, "Because can we find out? Because I want to see if I can do it. I want to see what my limits are, what I can achieve." And I was like, that's not from me saying anything to him. That's just him spending a couple of days watching me go through the ringer, watching people turn up and run with me and put themselves through some pain and shared suffering with me, and that motivated him to then think, actually, what can I do? And like I said, that wasn't me trying to impart any advice onto him. That was just me doing what I was doing, and what will be will be. And I think for me, it was this reminder again. And I've had this with my daughter, with Tilly, before, where I've come downstairs in the morning to find her on the rowing machine, busting out 1,000 meters because she'd seen me on it the day before and wanted to see what it was like. It's this, as a parent, you never know when they're watching, and whether you're on your phone whilst you sat down at the dinner table, whether you're running a marathon, whether you're getting up early to go to work. And it's the same as my mum when she was doing everything she was doing for our family when we were in the depths of financial difficulty and despair. Like, she probably didn't appreciate that I was watching, I was learning, I was taking values and morals from her that I now am embedded across how I am as an adult. So yeah, I think the biggest take home is you never know when your kids are watching. So do the right thing and do what you can to show them the kind of person that you are, the kind of person you want to be, and hopefully that'll then pass on that knowledge to them moving forwards.
Is that why you're aiming to be less combative moving forwards?
Yeah, I think for me it's just so many people have an opinion nowadays, and the problem with social media is it's given everyone an opportunity to tell you their opinion. And it's just years of playing rugby, and like, if you call me something, I'll call you it back. If you throw a punch, I'll throw one back. And it's just this whole school ground mentality that rugby sometimes brings, and I probably never let it go. So yeah, for me it is that remembrance that the old me would have waded in on this person that was accusing me of money laundering at the weekend, and I'd have been commenting on it and trying to prove them wrong and so on and so forth. Whereas now I'm like, what will be, you judge me by your standards. I don't need to justify myself to you. You do you, I'll do me. And I think that's been quite a significant learning point from the 48, is that you can't please everyone. Like, I ran 48 marathons in 48 days in 48 counties, raised £41,000, and people will still criticise it. I've still had people say, well, they weren't proper marathons. Well, no, of course not, dickhead, because do you try and find 48 official marathons in 48 days in 48 counties? It ain't going to happen. And secondly, like, people, oh, well, you didn't run all of it. You go and walk 26.2 miles for 48 days and see how you get on. But it's just this reminder that you will never, ever please everyone. You could be a saint and you're still going to have someone throw a stone at you. So for me, that learning point was, let them throw their stones. You only feel the weight of the stones they're throwing if you choose to pick them up and throw them back. So yeah, that was quite a big point of learning and a reminder for me. And hopefully I am getting better at that.
Well, as I said earlier, it's a journey you've been on, but it's an ongoing journey for us all, isn't it? And you'll probably reflect on this for a long time coming. Johnny and I still sit back and reflect on elements of Project Vertical even now. We're just sitting there being like, that was silly. This was funny. The simplicity there was great. I missed this. I missed that. It's just a part of who you are now, which is the beauty of it. And that's why I asked, do you miss elements of it? Because sometimes when things are stressful, I'm like, you know what? I wish I was just waking up at 4 a.m. every morning to have a cooked breakfast and to go up and down Ben Nevis, which is just such a stupid thing to say out loud, but we've been there. So it's and that was a quarter of the time in reality. So
I think the problem is with it as well is like there's not really many people you can share those lessons with. Like, there's not many people that have. Well, there's no one in England that's run 48 marathons in 48 days. There's no one that's done what you guys have done other than each other. So you have these almost like surreal, weird, sadistic memories of things. Like, I was coaching the other day and the group said, because they were in the middle of a wall sit, and they were like, "Oh, tell us a funny story from the 48." And my funny story was me falling unconscious and smashing my head open and a stranger helping me glue my eye back together. And they were like, "That's not a funny story." But for me, looking back, that is a funny story. But it just shows you that those experiences, like, you're part of essentially an elite group of idiots that do this stuff that the normal person, but I still consider myself normal. I don't consider myself some sort of super athlete or any different to normal people. I'm just normal as well. But you do create this warped view of the world where you find things funny and you miss the simplicity of the struggle and the suffering. But I guess that's why, like me, you never stand still and you're a what am I doing next kind of person rather than what have I already done. So yeah, that's also big to me and part of my identity is I don't ever want to be that guy that's like, oh, well, I one time ran 48, Matt. I want to be, well, actually, I've done all that, but now I'm doing this. So the past is important, but I think the present and what we do now is more important than our old successes and our old achievements.
Yep, no, I completely agree there. Completely agree, and I think the real value of these things is actually the lessons to be taken from them rather than the actual event themselves. And I know I'm a better person for having been an elite idiot, to quote you and use your own words against you, which is something I will be writing down. That might be a forehead tattoo if ever I've heard one. But no,
there's a coaching business there. Are you an elite idiot? Do you want to put yourself in pain and harm's way for learning experiences and charity?
For any listeners, there will be a sponsored ad on your Instagram stories you'll be seeing very, very soon, mark my words. But no, it's just fascinating to hear from what, from the outside looking in, was... I mean, I giggled at points being like, God, that's going to be absolutely bleak. But with a smile on my face, because I just kind of could picture what situation you'd be in on that day, knowing that the next 100 steps would be miserable, but after that you'd be like, oh, off we go. And being able to see the impact, being able to see your kids, see your other half, and just have a bit of a base and keep cracking on must have been a really valuable experience, because it must have been very, very lonely at points. Even if it was a 10K loop on your own, I can imagine with that exhaustion, with that fatigue, you did find yourself very alone in your own thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that really that impressed upon me is there's always somebody worse. Like, I think it was day like 15, I could barely stand, my ankle was a mess, my tibant was swollen, they thought I had compartment syndrome in my leg, I was just in a world of pain, and in my head I had this post that I was going to put out, but it was when I was really, really struggling. So do you know when people like take letters from their family and they only open them in times of absolute kind of despair?
Well, I did that Project Vertical with an email account. I had people send stuff in, and I dipped into it twice, 2 or 3 times actually. Just read through a few, and it was all I needed.
Yeah, exactly that. And I put on Instagram, and I actually stole it from the Iron Cowboy when he was in the middle of his 101 Ironmans, and it was, I'm struggling. Why is today not the day that I quit? I was just looking for a bit of extrinsic motivation, and a guy messaged me. I won't share you his name, but he messaged me saying that he's currently started chemo and radiation therapy at a similar time to when the 48 started, and his radiation and chemo finished the day before the 48 finished, and he was planning on coming to the final day to enjoy and celebrate the finish of the 48 and the finish of his cancer treatment at the same time. And it was in that moment I was just like, what am I moaning about? Get up, start moving, and get on with it. And that was a constant golden thread throughout when I was really struggling. I was just like, do you know what? Like, I framed it as I get to get up today and I get to complete a marathon. Some people don't even get to have that choice. Me, I'm a big believer in choice, and our belief and our understanding that everything we do in life, for the most part, is our choice. And so I just tried to frame each day as this is my choice to get up and do this. So get on with it and do it. You put yourself in this situation. You chose to do it. So keep moving forwards. And it was that strong reminder that no matter how bad or dark a day you're having, there's probably someone else out there that's struggling more than you. So find something to be thankful for. Cling on to that for dear life and get moving.
Exactly. And did he make it to the celebrations?
He did. Came along to the celebration.
Awesome.
His wife ran a half marathon with me, and then we had a beer after. So
that's fantastic.
So yeah, if you are listening, I won't say his name just for privacy, but you're a massive reason that I finished that 48. So thank you for reaching out and sharing your journey with me as well.
Well, it just testament, isn't it, to the impact that these things can have behind the scenes and some of the messages that you might not ever receive. And I know he didn't do it for the messages, for the gratification that comes from it. It was for the awareness and for the funding that is now tangibly going to fund. I don't want to put you on the spot, but how many meals with the total divided by cost now?
It's in the thousands. The trust can't actually give us a definitive number because for every regional area, the cost for meals is different. But it's roughly around £3 for a week of food for a child. So yeah, into the thousands of meals that we'll be able to provide. And the Miles for Meals charity is a grant-based organisation that is essentially helping community groups, schools, businesses and organisations that wouldn't normally be able to get funding through normal charities, for those that are working with children living in food poverty. So that's going to set up all sorts of different campaigns and projects, and part of what we want to do is to try and educate children living in food poverty that their reality doesn't have to be their future. I'm, I suppose, a walking, talking example of that. Like, I lived in the depths of food poverty, and I'm certainly not there now. So we want to try and educate as well as feed. It's not just giving them food and a helping hand, it's also showing them that that doesn't have to be their life moving forward if they don't want it to be.
Yep, it's taking them out of that box, isn't it? That label that we've discussed so much today. But where can people find out more about the Miles for Meals initiatives and what's happening next with them?
So the easiest place is just the direct onto the Miles for Meals Instagram, Facebook or website. The Instagram, let me just double check so I'm giving you correct information, but I'm sure you'll be able to put it in your show notes for me. It is, Miles for Meals _UK. And then I'll be posting regularly on my Instagram about it as well, which is _John.Clark. But I've always said from day one, like the radio kept, whenever they interviewed me, saying, "Oh, you're raising money for your charity." It's not my charity. I'm a trustee of the charity, and it's a collective agreement and a collective focus. So, yes, I'll be posting about it. But for the most up-to-date information, follow the Miles for Meals page.
And for those that want to dissect your musings throughout the 48 days, best place is your personal Instagram, am I right in saying?
Yeah, my personal Instagram's kind of everything from coaching, life, mindset, competing. And I've just started a new blog called The Fresh Set of 7, which aims to go deeper than the 220 characters that Instagram limits us to. So that was actually a request of a lot of people that I spoke to throughout the 48 that said, "Oh, you should write a book." And I don't think I have the following to write a book, but I can, like any idiot that's got access to the internet, can create a blog. So, so that's just an insight into what I've learned over the years as a coach, as a competitor, as an athlete, as a seeker of challenges and stupidity.
Before we go, if there was one sentence from your reflections throughout the 48 that you could impart onto our listeners today, what would it be?
Don't create a glass ceiling for yourself based on other people's opinion. If I'd have listened to the unimaginable amount of people that told me I couldn't do it, I was too heavy, I'm not a runner, I've got no pedigree in athletic endurance, so on and so forth, I wouldn't have even got a map and started counting how many counties there were. Don't build a ceiling for yourself based on other people's opinion of your ability. Only you get to decide your capability, ability, and fortitude to achieve what you want to achieve. But likewise, don't chase other people's opinions of success. Find your own. And I realised that was 2 sentences, but I took a liberty and went with it.
I'd say we could comma it, and then we'll put an asterisk with asterisk with the caveat. I think is the get out of jail free clause for you there. But now, John, thank you very much. I hope we've covered as many of the reflections as we could in the time that we've had. But it was remarkable to watch unfold, and I hope you're very proud of what you achieved, and I'm sure you'll be able to sit back and reflect on it when you are up to your eyeballs in something equally as stressful in the future, which we didn't get onto today, but everybody now knows where to find out all the information they can on what you've got coming up next, and as we can safely assume, it will be equally, if not more, elite idiocy, I guess is the right word for it here. But no, thank you very much.
Yeah, Ginger going to the Sahara Desert, I can confirm, is elite idiocy. But no, thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it. And as with all podcasts, if anyone wants to reach out, ask me any questions that we didn't get covered today, please drop me a message and I'll always get back to you. But yeah, thanks for having me on.
Perfect. Thanks for having you. Cheers.